Ultra MAGA was trending the other day after Joe Biden said that MAGA is the most extreme political organization in U.S. history. Recent history, he then added to that. I think it's important context, but either way, it's a patently absurd notion. Oh, a whole bunch of Trump supporters who want manufacturing back in the United States and have, from traditionally conservative views to somewhat moderate social views, they're the most extreme. The conservatives today that are, for the most part, on board with gay marriage, not all of them, of course. And that's where I think things may actually start to get a little crazy. Well, following the ultra MAGA trend, it was because Joe Biden said that ultra MAGA, the ultra MAGA agenda, we see many people memeing this, like Mr. Jack Posobiec, who changed his name to Ultra MAGA Poso. I mean, can I just say right off the bat, what's with trying to make the right seem edgy, cool, and punk rock? Yo, please. But I suppose the Democrats and the establishment have become so stodgy and, well, establishment that the only thing they can say is that the right is bad, but they do so in a way that makes them seem edgy. Ultra MAGA? What is this, Dragon Ball Z, Goku's Ultra Instinct? Some anime reference for you? Well, okay. Let's talk about the dramatic escalation in psychosis, starting with a tweet from Jack Posobiec. Jack says, let's just check in on the left and holy schlit. This guy, Simon Gwynn. I don't even know if I can read this on YouTube, but I think we'll talk about it. It's not a direct call for violence, but I think we know what this guy is doing. Simon Gwynn says, he's a verified Twitter user. Interesting real-life trolley problem in America right now. If you had the chance to kill Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, the two oldest right-wing Supreme Court judges, should you do it while Biden can get his nominees to replace them confirmed? It's interesting as an abstract question, but becomes a real conundrum if, say, you're terminally ill and have little to lose yourself, but know that it could save many women's lives in the future. Yo, these people are deranged. They are psychotic. They don't know what they're talking about. This, we know what it is, okay? It's terrifying. Violence is wrong, outright. When it comes to political violence in the streets, like riots, it doesn't work. Black Lives Matter lost so much support. Man, imagine where they'd be if they didn't go and burn everything down. But the media desperately tries to cover for them. This dude, Simon Gwynn, is basically, he's saying, oh, won't someone rid me of this priest? The famous line in which someone then went and rid this king of his priest. The idea was, I wasn't telling anyone to do it. I was just expressing myself that I was frustrated with these people. And then somebody went and did it. We get it. This is crazy. What's happening right now with Roe v. Wade, first of all, hasn't been overturned. Likely will be. We've long said it likely will be. If it is, it means that it will go back to the states. This is not an extreme position. It is the position held by Republicans my entire life. Okay, fine. The left might be like, but that is extreme. It's always been extreme. They've always been extreme. If baseline in this country was ban abortion outright and some restrictions, then the middle is some restrictions. Like that was the compromise. The left has now gone so far left that to them, it seems extreme to hold the traditionally conservative position, which was not extreme in the 90s or the 2000s or the 2010s. It's only just now, well, I suppose in the later 2010s with Trump. Yo, this guy is basically putting out a call to somebody who's got nothing left to lose to commit serious acts of violence against the Supreme Court. This is scary stuff. Now, I suppose, context being important, he says, I've removed my recent 2 tweets about the U.S. Supreme Court as on reflection, they're obviously pretty irresponsible, though I don't think they would be against Twitter's terms of service. FYI, I don't endorse murdering anyone, but don't think there's anything wrong with thought experiments. Twitter is not often a good place for them. Yo. Civil war? Come on, man. People are like, Tim, you're crazy for thinking that the things that are happening were going to happen. I remember going back a few years. 2018, I was like, I think we're on track for a civil war. And I think, as I mentioned this the other day, it bears repeating because I know not everybody watches every video I put out. Sorry if you've heard me say this, but most people haven't. My view of things is not that some individual is becoming more politically extreme. Like, dude wakes up one day and then is just like, I'm going to be extreme. Like, I'm more extreme than I was yesterday. I do think that plays a role to a certain degree. That articles keep one-upping themselves. Leftists keep having to incite rage to make money off of their news platforms. They accuse the right of doing the same thing, and to an extent, they're not wrong. But no. When I say I think civil war is coming, you need to understand I'm talking about when a 15-year-old today who grows up on this is 25 in 10 years and is a fighting age male. Kids who are raised in this culture will be untethered, will be at odds with the other political side. Those of us that are millennials, that are very much waving our arms in the air and screaming about the others, we grew up at a time when we were unified. We grew up at a time when we worked together and we're just angry about it. And now that we're getting older and we're getting more politically divided, we're like, hey, these are really bad things and you're a bad person. What happened to you? I've been on the Young Turks show, I think twice. I've been at parties with them. Crazy. That divide has happened. So there is that incremental divide. But I think, me knowing them, it's like we argue, we're not going to get crazy violent or anything. But what about the people in the next generation who have never experienced any tolerance or camaraderie or anything like that, or any unity with the others? When the older generation ages out, the young people will view each other as completely foreign and they will fight. I think that's what's happening. It's happening more and more. Let's take a look at what Brian Tyler Cohen has to say as the escalation continues. Ben Shapiro, this is a tweet from him, quote, Obergefell is a bad Supreme Court decision, and if we had a Supreme Court worth its salt, they would overturn Obergefell. There it is. Wasting no time goading SCOTUS into overturning same-sex marriage. There is more at stake in November than you can imagine. I want to point something out. Actually, let me read this. Read this other tweet below from Rachel Stevens. She said, I literally had to have a conversation with my husband, who is not the same race as me, about where we would need to move if Loving v. Virginia gets overturned. Luckily, he has family overseas that we'd live with if this case gets overturned. Yes. Okay. Because every Republican right now is clamoring to pass miscegenation laws. Literally no one is. Maybe someone somewhere, I don't know. But nobody is publicly like, we have to have trigger laws for miscegenation laws, banned interracial cohabitation and marriage and procreation, etc. Abortion had trigger laws. Republicans have never agreed with abortion. Interracial marriage, everybody's fine with. In fact, there's a bunch of Republicans and conservatives who are in interracial marriages. That fight is done. Obergefell Obergefell, not v. Virginia. Obergefell is the let me give you the proper name. It is where is it? What do we got here? Are they going to bring it up? Okay. They're just saying at Newsweek it could threaten LGBTQ rights. Obergefell v. Hodges. Sorry. It's a reference to what ultimately resulted in nationwide recognition of same-sex marriage and required states to issue these licenses. Now, it's possible that this could be overturned. I don't know if that Ben Shapiro quote is true and correct. I don't trust the left when they quote people. So for all I know, Ben Shapiro said something like, here, let me pull up his tweet again. For all we know, Ben Shapiro was like, you actually have people who are coming out saying Obergefell is bad Supreme Court decision. And if we had a Supreme Court worth its salt, they would overturn Obergefell. Obviously, that's ridiculous. What if Ben Shapiro said something like that and they just, that's what they do on the left. Now, I actually don't think that statement from Ben Shapiro is all that out of the question. I think it sounds reasonable that Ben Shapiro might say something like that, but I'm not going to say he did because I don't trust these people. I think they lie and manipulate all the time. Well, now we're seeing what the narrative is becoming, that with Roe v. Wade going away, the Republicans and the right will come for the next down the line. Maybe. But I think they're very different cases. Let me explain. Roe v. Wade has to do with first of all, what should be a legislative issue, not a Supreme Court issue. And you could potentially argue the same thing for Obergefell v. Hodges. And technically, you could argue the same thing for Loving v. Virginia. The argument was that states have a right to enact whatever laws they want. I don't completely agree, however, because the 14th Amendment does apply. And when it comes to Loving v. Virginia, which basically made interracial marriage legal, we're dealing with the 14th Amendment, which was enshrined specifically because of the end of slavery, in which we were saying we are granting equal rights under the law. If you can get married, then you can get married to someone regardless of their race. Kind of the point of the 14th Amendment in many ways. Roe v. Wade, not so much. You're dealing with two individual life forms sharing one body. Difficult questions. But here's what Newsweek says. Alito's argument for overturning Roe v. Wade is built around the idea that the right to abortion does not fall in the category of those rights deeply rooted in the nation's history and tradition, and implicitly in the concept of ordered liberty, a direct mention to the Washington v. Glucksberg case, in which the Supreme Court voted against a physician who had challenged the state of Washington's ban on assisted suicide. In that case, the court ruled that helping a terminally ill patient to die went against the country's tradition and practices. I do not believe that the country's traditions and practices should be a good legal argument. Sort of. I'll put it this way. Yeah, this country has a lot of really bad traditions and practices. We want to do away with many of them and improve things and progress, as it were. But if we were to root this, our Constitution in our country's traditions, then you'd go back 200 years and you'd have some pretty wacky laws. I mean, at that point, you're like, nobody can put a pie on their windowsill on Sunday. So I'm not a big fan of that argument. Alito claims that abortion was entirely unknown in American law until the latter part of the 20th century, a statement that would apply to other fundamental rights only established in the past decade, including LGBTQ rights. Now, here's where things get interesting. It should be up to the states to legislate beyond what the Constitution has to offer. And this is where things get interesting. The left continually says there is a constitutional right to abortion. There isn't. That makes no sense. I'm sorry. I can understand a bit of what Alito is saying. I don't know if this argument makes sense. The point is, guns in the Constitution, equal rights under the law in the Constitution. So let me break it down for you, my friends, if you want to get hip with it. There are people of different races. They must be treated equally under the law. An individual must receive equal protection under the law, as per the 14th Amendment. If you are white, if you are black. If two white people can get married, equal protection then applies to people of different races to get married. Boom. Supreme Court precedent, constitutional law makes sense. That's what the Constitution has to offer. If you want to amend the Constitution, go for it. But you want to bring up the 14th Amendment. There's a reason why the left won't tell you that life begins at conception. Because if that was the case, the 14th Amendment would apply to the baby and the mother, in which case you cannot kill the baby. There's no logical argument, none presented, as to why life begins at any other point other than conception. We had, just the other day, our guest on Timcast IRL was saying maybe at some, I think it was Alan Bakari might have said, at some point after conception, but, or sometime after the first trimester, but, like something like that. I can't remember. Forgive me, Alan. I forgot exactly how you phrased it. The general idea was that life doesn't begin at conception. It begins like a few weeks in maybe, or a month or two. And I said, that makes no sense. There's no distinction. What's your distinction? How is it that you can say at 4 weeks it's alive? The heartbeat bill? Heartbeat? Okay, well, the heartbeat bills are being challenged as well. You can see the heartbeat. It's an independent life form. No. Some people don't have heartbeats. They have machines that deal with this for them. Okay, well, it needs to be incubated. Look, the problem is science has continually pushed the boundary of how young or how early stage a fetus can be to survive. I think 21 weeks now. 21. And the baby can survive and grow and become a full-fledged adult human being with little repercussions to their long-term health. There still are repercussions. What if we get to the point where at any stage in conception, the life can be put in an artificial womb and preserved? The left still has no argument for this to say up to the mother. No, it is not up to a mother to kill her child. You need a sound, logical argument for which we base whether life has begun and someone earns rights. It seems to me that the argument from the left is consistently that rights are bestowed upon you when we as a society deem you have personhood. No way. That is an insane, reductive, it's an insane, archaic way of looking at things. Back in the day, Democrats did not grant personhood to slaves, so they didn't have rights. The Constitution did not apply to them. Yeah, that's BS. Humans have rights. The same group is now arguing that babies don't. If you can come to me and present a solid legal argument, scientific argument as to why life does not begin until a certain point, I'm down to hear it. They say, it's just a clump of cells. And I'm like, that's not an argument. A clump of cells in many other circumstances, is considered an independent life form. They say, well, there's no brain function. There are human beings with no brain function on life support. They still have rights. Well, no heartbeat. I mentioned the heartbeat thing. No kidneys, no stomach, whatever. No legs, no arms, no brain activity. Doesn't matter. These people all still have constitutional rights. This is part of the big legal debate. Now, if your brain function has ceased, a guardian will take responsibility, but there's still a legal battle over what they can do. Why would it be any different for a baby? And if that's true, the Constitution applies to the fetus. Therein lies the big challenge. If that were true, you can't have abortions. So it is difficult. And I still lean, despite all of these things, from a libertarian perspective towards pro-choice. But it's like right in the middle, slightly on the other side. I don't like it. I don't like abortion. I think it's abused. I think that's wrong. I think abortion as contraception is wrong. But anyway, here's the point. The argument being made right now, because I'm going to go off on the abortion thing again, is that there's an opportunity to overturn Obergefell v. Hodges. The court ruled it was unconstitutional for states to ban or refuse to recognize same-sex marriage. My point here? No, because human beings are protected under the 14th Amendment. And so if two people have a right to marry, then two men have a right to marry. Now, some may say, well, that opens the door to polygamy. It doesn't, because the law is only ever enshrined that one person can marry one other person. I mean, I suppose polygamy has existed at some point. But if the law says person can marry person, then person can marry person regardless of certain characteristics. If the law says person is granted protections for their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, then that means the baby and the mother. You can't use the 14th Amendment to argue both simultaneously that one does not deserve rights and one does. But where are we headed with this? Civil war, violence, that's the only way I can see it. These people have no logic behind what they're saying. They're calling for insane acts of violence. They can't tell you exactly why. They are psychotic tribalists. Me? I'm not going to sit here and pretend that everybody on the right has a sound argument. There are a whole lot of dumb cultists, Trump supporters. But I am trying to understand arguments and break down what are the rules, how do we know what to do, and how does this manifest itself in further law? The left cannot do it. I have asked over and over again, try and figure out when life begins, see what they have to say. They'll give you a bunch of different answers. I was told by Vosh, sometime after birth, I guess. First breath. It just changes all the time. So I ask a conservative. I ask a Ben Shapiro. Ben gives me a logical argument. A clump of cells on Mars would be life, right? And that's true. RNA or certain proteins found in outer space are considered the building blocks of life. A single-celled organism is called life. A tree is called life. Yet a clump of cells of human DNA forming and growing is not. I don't understand how that makes sense. It's not an argument. They say miscarriages happen all the time, and we don't mourn people do mourn their miscarriages. Even when they don't know about it, it doesn't mean it's not a life. It was just a small clump of cells. It's got to start somewhere. There's a really great argument I saw. They said a human embryo looks nothing like a human. And someone responded, a sea turtle looks nothing like a turtle, but it's illegal to crush. I find that also very fascinating. Why is it that you can't legally crush a sea turtle egg, but you can abort a baby? My argument here, when it comes to, there's a difference, mind you. Eggs are outside the body. The turtle has laid the egg is doing its thing. The turtle has gone off and done its thing. Not that I think animals have human rights. I do think animals there's certain protections that they do have. But the problem with abortion, as I see it, in terms of the law, is two individuals occupying one bloodstream and organs. Can the baby survive on its own? Libertarians say this is called the right to evict. The mother has a right to evict someone from her body. And I agree with that to a certain extent. If you invite someone into a home to live there, you do not get to evict them without cause because people need a place to live. It would be extremely disruptive and damaging to an individual if you are now without home. So we have laws. If someone is a legal tenant, they get legal protections. You can't just evict them. If a woman invites a baby into her body, evicting would now terminate its life, and I believe that is wrong. But there's also other questions about whether or not the woman was forced to let someone in their home. If someone invades your home, if someone kicks your door in and then brings their family into your house, you can evict them. You absolutely can. Oh, but they'll freeze to death. Not my problem. I have a right to my autonomy in my property, in my body. The problem then arises with, can the government in any circumstance mandate that a person give their body to another person? Now, we're not talking about your home. We're talking about your bloodstream. And this is where I say I'm willing to compromise. As much as I understand the right's arguments, I don't think the left has any. I would say after the first trimester, no way. You've got, for the most part, a viable baby that you can protect its life, then it should. In the first trimester, I recognize there's a compromise to be made. The problem, I suppose, ultimately is my position doesn't matter. Republicans want abortion banned in almost all circumstances. Most people in the country want some restrictions, but the left wants unfettered abortion. I will never agree with that. Never. I'm not going to vote for any Democrats. I'll put it really, really simply for all of you. I believe that when it comes to the first trimester, for the most part, there may be some circumstances we can question it. A woman can go to the doctor and have a conversation that is private because it may involve very serious issues that are none of my business, and I don't like the government mandating someone give up their body to someone else. And then the question is, yikes, man. Right to evict, to kill the child. It's rather horrifying. But then I think about what I would feel like if the government told me I had to mandate my body to someone else. Yeah, I don't know, man. I just cannot get past that mental that barrier. I can't do it. I'm sorry, I can't do it. The idea of the government being like, your body is now someone else's for an X amount of time, I'm like, nope. Even temporary. But I also think that responsibility plays a huge role, and there's so many factors in this. I just don't have all the answers. Anyway, I talk about it too much, and I don't have the answers, so I should probably just stop the rambling, and I'll put it this way. These people are increasingly violent. This is the direction we're headed in. I hope you're paying attention. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.